Hello there. Welcome to this action hour. Are you ready to make movement an essential and joyful part of your life? Join us for this month's action hour as I sit down with Dr. Daphne Bascom to explore why movement matters more than you might think. As a health coach, plant-based nutrition expert, and fitness advocate, Daphne brings a wealth of knowledge on how movement supports overall health and well-being. In this engaging conversation, you'll discover practical strategies for overcoming common barriers to movement, navigating challenges like time constraints or lack of motivation, and recovering from injuries. Whether you're just beginning your fitness journey or looking to take it to the next level, Daphne's insights will leave you inspired and empowered to move with confidence. For some context, this is a project of Whole Life Club, which is Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. Some of the questions that I'll be bringing to this interview come from our Whole Life Club members. Nothing you hear today is medical advice. We are offering coaching and our own best insights. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding your specific healthcare results and needs. Now, I'd like to introduce Daphne. Daphne Bascom, MD, PhD, is a certified health coach with The Vegan Gym who studies plant-based nutrition and human performance. Daphne previously served as Vice President of Population Health for St. Luke's Health System in Kansas City, Senior Vice President and Medical Director at the YMCA of Greater Kansas City, and Interim Chief Health Officer for the YMCA. Daphne was also the Chief Clinical Systems Officer for the Cleveland Health System. Welcome, Daphne.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here.
We are so excited for you to be here and to learn from you, for you to share the wonderful insights that I am sure you will be sharing with us today. So, Daphne, to kick things off, I'd love to hear a bit about your fitness journey. What first sparked your passion for health and wellness, and what led you to where you are today?
Well, thank you for asking. It's a long story, and I'll compress it so that I don't take up the whole hour. I, I was healthy and fit, I would say, my teenage years. So growing up, I was a little bit of I was slightly overweight and got into organized sports in school, ran track, everything up to about the 800 meters. So I was able to be fit and healthy while I was going through high school. Between college, medical school, graduate school, and then starting a new career, all of that went by the wayside, as it often can. And I think I put my health as secondary to life and career. My big wake up call came really in my 40s, as I was turning 40, when I had adopted some lifestyle behaviors that weren't necessarily serving me. And so for my 40th birthday, I treated myself to some time with a personal trainer and realized it just reignited my passion for being in the gym, for lifting weights, and sparked my interest in physique competitions. So it was kind of at 40 that I became re-energized in terms of movement in general. And that was reinforced when I went to work at Cleveland Clinic and was part of their Lifestyle 180 program and just had the resources and the facilities to really focus on my fitness. And it's just continued. It's now part of who I am and what I aspire and continue to want to be. And I love any form of movement.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And what a great birthday gift, right? Your health.
Exactly.
What better gift can there be? Well, thank you again, Daphne, for sharing that. And speaking of movement, and I love that you use that word because it really does go beyond fitness or exercise, right? I think movement is just often, at least, such a better kind of encompassing term. So we're going to use that for now. Why is movement so essential for our overall health and well-being? And how does it go beyond just physical fitness in your eyes?
Movement, next to mindset, I think movement is a key pillar that we endorse in our coaching program because we all have to move. Um, Looking at it from a health perspective, we know that movement in whatever form that you enjoy moving It supports your cardiovascular health. It supports your brain health. It supports your emotional health. It supports your musculoskeletal health. So we are creatures that were meant to move, and continuing to move is it's key for ensuring that we have a long health span and a long lifespan. Now, movement can take on different varieties. You can think of movement as anything from gardening to walking to rowing to running to rucking. They're all different forms of movement, but movement is important from a health and longevity perspective to ensure that we retain our musculoskeletal strength, that we have a way to help with our managing our weight, that we can maintain our flexibility and our mobility. And all of these are tied up into movement. The other piece of movement that I think is sometimes not necessarily considered is the community aspect, because I really encourage anyone who is participating in any form of movement, when you do it with other people, it's even more fun. And that community provides accountability, but it also provides some of that necessarily, the feedback you get from doing things with others, whether it's the dopamine or the serotonin. But moving in community is also a great way to augment our health.
I love that, Daphne. Community. I'm all about community. So are we at Food Revolution Network and, of course, in Whole Life Club. We might actually be circling back to community. I think that's a fascinating angle here in movement. So, again, we might circle back here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, and I love everything else that you shared, long health span, not just lifespan. And you're right, movement can and maybe even should take on as much form, right, as much variety as possible. Um, I'm curious about something else, barriers to movement. What are some of the most common barriers that maybe you see or know that people face when it comes to staying active? And how can they overcome them? What do you recommend? What do you help people to do to overcome these barriers?
Well, that's a great question. And I will say up front that there is no barrier that we can't find a solution for, which is why everything is figure outable. Um, so the most common barrier I hear is I don't have time. And the time element is one that I appreciate. We're all busy, but you have to make time to be healthy. Movement can occur in a variety of different forms, and I worry that from a society perspective, we've given people this misperception that movement means I have to go to a gym, I have to spend an hour there, I have to work out, then I have to shower and change, I have to go to the sauna, I have to go to the cold plunge. That movement doesn't have to take hours of your time. If you can give me 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes every hour, 5 minutes every 2 hours, I can share with you a movement program that will help support your health and longevity goals. But time should not be a barrier because we can always find time. It's understanding how we can fit that time for you to move within your busy schedule. Things that I encourage on a regular basis are walking meetings at work. So if you feel like you don't have time to move at work, encourage your team or those that you work with to go on walking meetings. It's good for your team. It's good for your heart. Plus, if you can go outside and get in nature, you get an additional benefit. If you work from home or even at some businesses, having a walking desk or even a standing desk is better than sitting all day. Or even perching on the edge of a chair is better than simply sitting with your feet elevated all day. So even within the vegan gym, many of our team members have walking pads. And so that during meetings, you'll frequently see us walking. And that's just another way of getting movement in during your day. So the time element is one that's real, but it's one that is navigable if you have the effort. And it may be that you do a little bit of habit stacking so that you can have those little movement snacks as part of your regular day. Another barrier I frequently hear is that I don't know how. And this in particular comes up when you're talking about resistance training. which can be intimidating. So the thought of going to a big box gym or starting a resistance training program at home, a lot of individuals are concerned because they don't necessarily know how to start and how to do it safely. And this is a time when I would encourage you to either go to a gym and spend some time with a personal trainer, someone who can orient you to the equipment, who can help you understand some of the basic movements and show you how to do them safely, because safety is paramount. Personal trainer, health coach, physical therapist, there are definitely resources available on the internet through YouTube that will give you some guidance for beginner workouts. And that includes working out from a chair. So again, there's always a way to remove the barrier, but knowledge is important so that you can exercise safely. Third barrier or challenge I sometimes hear is age. And I just want to say that there is no age at which you're too old or too young to start a movement program. I always want to encourage, if you start and you develop the habit of movement younger and you can sustain that through your life, that's the best thing. But if you're listening to us today and you're 80 years old or 90 years old, you can start now. There is never a time when it's too late to start. And that's not just for gentle movements. That's even for movement that involves resistance training, which I want to talk about because resistance training is very important. But age is not a barrier, and there are multiple studies that demonstrate that adopting a movement program, including resistance training, by that I mean whether it's dumbbells, barbells, body weight, is something that can be done no matter what your age. Again, you just have to find a way to do it safely. Another barrier I frequently hear, especially from women, is I don't want to get bulky. And this frequently relates to resistance training. And ladies, I can tell you in all honesty, I've been trying to get bulky for years and it doesn't happen. As long as you are training naturally, you will get toned, you will get the whole goal is body recomposition so that you gain lean muscle, maybe lose some subcutaneous fat if you're moving, or if one of your health goals is fat loss. But you're never going to have muscles like a bodybuilder as long as you're doing so naturally. So that concern about getting bulky is one that I like to dispel right out the gate, because it takes years to grow muscle, and it takes years to retain muscle, and it takes years to maintain muscle. And I would encourage every woman who's listening to incorporate some form of resistance training into what they do on a regular basis. I think those are kind of the top 4 barriers I frequently hear.
Yeah, and I'd love to circle back to one or two of those, but just real quickly on strength training, I mean, it also has its benefits for our bone health and preventing that injury, right? Do you want to speak a little bit to that point too?
Strength training, and many of you may have been hearing this from multiple clinical leaders across the industry. Muscle is the organ of longevity. I firmly believe it, because having muscle, meaning lean muscle that can help you contribute to your strength, contribute to your movement, and allow you to do your activities of daily living, that is what is going to enable you to have both a long health span and a lifespan. So resistance training means either moving your body or moving your body against gravity, or moving weight against gravity. So it could be dumbbells, it could be barbells, but even body weight training is a great form of resistance training. The benefit of actually incorporating resistance training into your program is that we will lose muscle as we age. That's just a given. And I've spoken about this previously, in that over time, we will tend to lose some muscle, but it's not an inevitability. I've been able to actually gain muscle from age 40 to age 59 through intentional activity. and effort in order to not lose muscle. But strength training will allow you to retain the lean muscle that you have. It is a way of continuing to have those functional movements that are so important. And those functional movements that we frequently employ when we're resistance training, like a squat, is similar to sitting on the bed or sitting on a toilet. You can think of a deadlift as picking up heavy sandbags or picking up kitty litter or something else that you may be wanting to carry that's heavy. I like to think of overhead press, where you're pressing a bar. That's very much akin to putting something into the cupboard overhead or putting your luggage into the luggage bin when you're traveling. All of these strength training movements can translate into everyday functional movements that we all want to continue to do as we grow older. And starting to incorporate them in a structured way, whether it's body weight, whether it's using bands, whether it's using dumbbells or barbells, is something that we can all do in order to prevent what's called sarcopenia, which is just that age-related decline in muscle mass over time.
Awesome. Daphne, thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about that because it is so important. And we have so many members who I'm sure are going to, their ears are going to perk up when they hear us starting to talk about that because it is so, again, important and top of mind for a lot of folks for obviously sound reason. And again, I wanted to circle back to some of the things you mentioned before on these barriers. I hear it all the time as well, not enough time. So I'm really glad that you spoke to that because you're right. So many people either believe or they feel or they've been told, they have to get a gym membership. Where are they going to fit it in? How can they fit in the hour-long classes in their busy schedules? So you spoke to how it doesn't have to look that way, right? It can fit your schedule. It may look different, right? But we talked about how exercise can and maybe should take all these different forms. So maybe it's not the hour-long fitness classes that you can participate in daily. Maybe that's once a week on the weekend or something. But how can you fit in movement in all these other forms throughout your day? Maybe that's what we need to be paying a little bit more attention to. I love the idea. I have one too of those walking pads, right? Kind of like those walking treadmills. They're not really meant for running. It's just meant for kind of more movement when otherwise you're doing more kind of what would be sedentary tasks. And then I had the thought, a lot of our members love to cook, right? Food Revolution Network, of course. I had the thought of when you're in the kitchen, of course you're on your feet and you're moving, and that alone is movement. That's fine. But if you wanted to, maybe incorporating some other kind of activity during your cooking session. Maybe you're listening to music and you're dancing and spinning a little bit, or maybe you're doing some intentional, right? Pay attention to your posture and all of that. Squats in every so often, or just something else. Is that approved as a kind of way to kind of multitask in a healthy way?
100% approved. And in a way, that's a form of habit stacking, Will. So if you're meal prepping, and definitely I like to encourage people to meal prep, you can do push-ups off the counter, so incline push-ups. You can do squats. I think that's awesome. You can do the same thing while you're brewing your coffee in the morning. So if you put your coffee on, you have a few minutes to wait. What can you do in that small amount of time while your coffee's brewing? You can do a couple squats. You could do a plank. You could do some push-ups off the counter. You can sit on a chair and stand up. So chairs sit to stands, almost like doing a squat. There are many different types of moments in our day when we can incorporate some activity. A stupid one it sounds stupid, even while you're brushing your teeth, you can be doing some squats while you're brushing your teeth. I think we tend to, many of us tend to be very black and white and think I'm either going to do everything or I'm going to do nothing, as opposed to understanding that those 5-minute increments add up over time. So if you do 5 minutes 6 times a day, you've done 30 minutes of movement, and that counts. Just because it's not a Zumba class or it's not a Peloton class doesn't mean that it doesn't count when it comes to your health and your fitness. All of those small little things that you do in terms of getting up from your desk after a meeting and taking 5 minutes for yourself, not just to move, but even just to center yourself, to do some deep breathing, some box breathing, some 4-7-8 breathing, maybe do a couple push-ups, do a couple squats, do some triceps dips from your chair. And then I bet when you go return to your work, you're much more focused, energized, and ready to hit the next task.
I think that's absolutely true, right? And I've even heard, I'm gonna share another one. I've even heard from some people uh, who this isn't why they started a garden, but they realize when they start a garden, it forces them to move more, right? They start a garden because they're interested, or maybe they grew up with a garden, or maybe they want to actually grow their own food, or grow flowers for the bees. But when they do that, they realize, oh, I have to move 3 or 4 times more throughout the day, and I'm bending down, and I'm trimming, I'm lugging dirt around, like they're doing all these extra things that they hadn't really intended on or thought about when they just had the vision of growing tomatoes and eating those tomatoes.
Gardening is a great total body exercise. Essentially, you're doing like a stand to sit to stand. If you're sitting down tending your garden beds, you're right. You're doing a farmer's carry when you're carrying some dirt in both hands. It mimics what we see in some of the blue zones areas. I think those are behaviors that, being out in the fields, being out in the garden, that will tend to force you to move. The same thing with having a pet. I think we know that most people who have a pet, usually a dog or something that needs to be walked, tend to have more movement than those that don't. And not to mention the love and affection that you get from having a pet, but just having to move so that you need to take your puppy out and go for a walk. It's another good motivator for you to move your body.
I completely agree. And speaking from or as a pet owner myself, it does work. It really does force you to prioritize, right? Because you have this other being that you're responsible for their health as well. Um, Similarly, I'm gonna ask another question here that might be similar to what we're talking about, but maybe there's a different angle we can take. So, uh, movement, as we're kind of talking about a little bit, can feel difficult or even like a chore for some people. But as a very active person myself who works with active people on a regular basis, I would love it if more people saw movement as a joyful, empowering habit that clearly you and I think we're on the same page there, Daphne. So what role does mindset play in building sustainable movement practices? Um, and how can someone cultivate a more positive relationship with physical activity? We've talked about time and these barriers, and we're probably going to be, again, having a somewhat similar conversation, but I am curious about mindset in this whole piece.
Well, mindset is paramount. To answer your question directly, the first thing is movement has to be something you love doing. It should not be a chore. It should be something that when I wake up in the morning and I'm a morning gym goer, I'm excited about going to the gym. I know that's my time. That's where I can get my day started, where I can energize myself. That whatever you choose as the form of movement that you want to pursue, it has to give you joy. And it has to be something that you are looking forward to doing on a regular basis. And it may not be the case when you start. I know I've worked with clients who they come in and they say they hate running, but they run for a minute one week, then they run for 2 minutes the next week, and then a couple weeks they're running for 5 minutes. And then before you know it, they're enjoying running. But a lot of it is overcoming some of that initial, you need to get through the barrier of either I don't like it, I don't have the time, I don't know how. Because if you give yourself 5 minutes to even just try it, I'm going to go sit on the cycle for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be 50 minutes. Doing that on a consistent basis, you may start to find that you actually enjoy things that you thought you didn't. And the goal really is consistency. I don't want you to feel that you have to move because someone told you you have to move, or society says that you are supposed to exercise 150 minutes a week. That becomes a chore. And that is not, when you're thinking about mindset, part of the shift that I like to encourage is I want to be a person who moves. And to be a person who moves means this to me. Maybe it means you go dancing. If you love to dance, dancing is a great form of movement. Maybe it is gardening. Maybe it's walking. I was with the group last week. We were walking in Zion National Park. There are beautiful things that you can do that are movement, and beautiful places near or far from your home, but those all count as movement. And it has to be repeatable, sustainable. You have to derive joy from it. And over time, from a mindset perspective, you really need to embody that commitment to movement as part of who you are and who you aspire to be.
I love that. I want to be a person who moves. I think that's a fantastic affirmation, mantra, just self mission. That you just want to, or vision that you just want to write on your wall or vision board. And what you're speaking to, for me, this is what's kind of clicking for me. Mindset, I think, for so many people, or maybe it's just for me. Uh, you can almost think of it as, and maybe it's wrong though. You either adopt it or you don't. And what I'm hearing from you is that it's actually something that you build and you cultivate and you nurture, and maybe you start saying, I want to be a person who moves or enjoys movement, but then you take action little by little, right? Bite-sized steps that feel achievable and are achievable for you, and you're cultivating, you're nurturing the mindset so that in 2 weeks time, in 6 months time, in a year's time, uh, movement is just as important and takes just as much priority as maybe healthy eating is, right? Speaking to our core audience. Does that resonate with you? The idea of mindset being something that we need to build and we need to work on. We don't just wake up with a brand new, strong foundational mindset. At least maybe not most of us.
No, well, I agree with you. I think building that mental muscle is important, and seeing yourself as someone who can is very important. And listening to you, the other thing that you reminded me about is frequently people have limiting beliefs around what they can do. And part of that mindset is removing your limiting beliefs. And those limiting beliefs may come from your childhood, they may come from people telling you you can't, or your own perception of, I'm too heavy to do this, or I'm too old to do this, or I was told I shouldn't do this. You have to remove those limiting beliefs, both from the perspective of wanting to move more, but those same limiting beliefs may be keeping you from doing other things in life that are important to you. And if you reframe it as a positive, I think that's a way of overcoming those limits, because there's nothing you can't do if you choose to. You may need to change, maybe make a modification to the exercise or come at it a different way. But if you limit yourself here, you won't get moving. Your mindset and you know, you're not allowing yourself to be limited by what you think is very important in terms of adopting a movement pattern that is sustainable. But that same type of mindset is important for anything we're going to do in life.
I think that's powerful. It makes me think of the phrase "you are what you eat," but in this case, you are what you think.
You are
I
what
I think it feels
No,
true.
you will manifest it. I mean, I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but if, a great example was I never thought of myself as a runner. I didn't start running until the pandemic. And, I ran when I was younger, stopped at around age 18. and then started running again in 2020. That's a long time between. And those first couple of runs were miserable. After when we went into lockdown, I was actually walking, I won't even say running, in the parking garage of my building, and started walking, and then started kind of jog walking, and then started doing a little more running. And just that, because I had to do something. I needed to move. But I started finding things in myself that I had never anticipated. And so I became a runner in my 50s, partly out of necessity, but it was removing my own limiting beliefs that I could that allowed me to do it.
Yeah, I've heard that story from many people, as I'm sure you did too, right? The pandemic kind of forcing them to try something new because, well, all of our routines were kind of pulled right out from
Upended.
from under us. Um, and you came to, it sounds like, enjoy it and maybe find that spark again that you once had when you
I
were
did.
younger.
I did.
Great. Well, let's pivot just a little bit. I mean, as people continue or maybe start getting active, maybe inspired by this conversation, unfortunately, something that they might experience is an injury, a physical injury. And physical injuries are dreadful. However, unfortunately, they can be common. For someone recovering from an injury, Daphne, how can they safely return to movement without fear or fear of re-injury or setbacks? What tips might you have to share that can help people through that process? Again, it might be a process that some people will find themselves in. It sometimes is part of the lifestyle.
Well, that's an important question, and I want to preface that by saying if you are injured, um, understand that the advice I'm going to share may pertain to you, but always listen to your healthcare team. The first thing that I always encourage people to understand is injury doesn't mean you can't do anything. So if you've broken an arm, you've broken a leg, you have a knee injury, you always have the other side of your body. And there are ways that you can continue to move and work through injury and retain some of the gains that you have developed over years while allowing that injured part of your body to heal. So I always like to reinforce the fact that it's what I can do, not what you can't do. So injury is, definitely something from which you need to recover, and you need to recover safely. But don't feel that injury precludes you from doing nothing. And I can share a little story about that in a little bit.
Okay, great. And I think that's great. Again, that's speaking of mindset, I think a huge mindset shift. I love what you said. It's what I can do. If I'm capturing this right, it's what I can do, not what I can't do. And I really
Exactly.
think that can be so helpful for people. I think, especially for uh, injured folks, especially if you're just getting started or you kind of really just found yourself in a good rhythm. Um, One of the biggest setbacks is the mental one, right? You're just so down and frustrated that now you can't do what you just started to do, or maybe you just started to kind of get good at or really enjoy for another week or 2 weeks or months potentially, right? Depending on the injury. But that mindset shift can be so powerful because while that may be true, you can't do the same thing for a week or 2 weeks or 6 months. Uh, Focus instead on what you can do, right? There's so
Yes.
many, okay, it's like food, right? Okay, you just discovered or you just developed a food sensitivity or allergy, so you can't eat that one food. There are thousands of other foods that you can eat, right? And so that mindset shift can really be so powerful, and maybe rewarding. Maybe that's an opportunity for us to learn that we can actually enjoy another type of movement, um, or find another friend. Maybe you join a support group, right, or some sort of social media group for folks who are dealing with injury, and now you cultivate a new relationship out of the situation. I think that mindset shift can be just so, again, such a an amazing potential opportunity.
It is. And I think injured, injuries are, let me start by saying, if something hurts when you're exercising or moving and it hurts and it persists, you need to make sure that you're not hurting yourself even more, which means that you need to listen to your body. And whether it's your foot, whether it's your knee, whether it's your hip, just make sure that you are doing movement safely. And that could even be walking. If I know a lot of people now are rucking, where you're carrying a weight on your back in a rucksack and you're going out and doing some hiking. That can cause pain in your traps, your shoulders, your back, many different places. The first piece of advice is definitely, if it hurts, stop, and then make sure that you are doing the exercise safely, and that when you resume, that whether it's a form correction, whether it's how you're using the equipment, that you've understood what you need to do differently going forward. Listening to your body is important, and there are many of us that tend to tune it out and just think, oh, I'll push through it. Not always a good idea. I've done it. I can tell you that you can exacerbate the injury by not actually, and lengthen your recovery time, as opposed to acknowledging that maybe you've been injured, allowing it to heal, and then getting back to your normal activity. If you are injured, there are always, even if it's not an injury where you have to stop doing movement altogether, there are always ways that we can regress exercises. Whether it's, for example, maybe you can't do walking lunges, but you can do standing lunges. Or if you can't do a full overhead press, maybe with dumbbells, maybe you can do something with a band. There are always considerations, and you may need to work with your personal trainer or with your physical therapist to understand, given the scope of your injury, what can you still do safely? But always ask that question, not just rest may be good, but continuing to keep your body moving. Even if you've broken your right arm, you can continue working out with your left arm, and the rest of your body will derive some benefits from that. So a good example, I had an injury in September. I broke my leg, and had 3 surgeries between September and November, but I kept moving. So I was working out with my left side of my body at home. I was doing sit to stands when I can. I was doing single arm work. I was doing curls. The end result is that at the end of, around the time I was able to get clearance to start weight bearing again, yes, I had lost some muscle on the right side of my body, but I'd actually gained muscle on the left side. And being able to be durable, and being able to have that resilience from continuing to move even while you're injured, that's important. And that's another important reason why movement matters, is that it provides you with durability. Because we know I was talking with Dr. Kelly and Juliet Starrett a couple weeks ago, and the phrase they use resonated with me, which is, we know the hits will come, whether it's falling and breaking my leg or something else that may happen. Having a strong body has really helped me endure and be durable in that recovery, so that I can come out on the other side and be ready to go. And that's why I want movement to be a cornerstone of what we all do, because it provides you with that durability.
That's right. So when the hits come, again, as I mentioned before, injuries are not uncommon when they do happen, and maybe you'd be spared, listener. But if they do happen, you have that strong body and mind to see your way through that healing and recovery process. Thank you, Daphne, for sharing all of that. And speaking of recovery, I think of nutrition as well. How can plant-based nutrition complement movement practices to enhance not only recovery, but maybe performance and overall vitality for an active person? What are some nutritional considerations people should take into account when they're starting to, get more active?
Well, that's a great question. And I want to make sure that, and I didn't emphasize this earlier, if you are someone who is trying to grow muscle or retain muscle, you need that combination of nutrition and movement. The two go together. You need to feed your body. Actually, I'm going to put a third in there: nutrition, movement, and recovery. So plant-based nutrition is so important for fueling your body appropriately so that you can benefit from the movement that you're undertaking and so that you can recover and grow muscle if that's your objective during those periods when you're resting, because your body, you don't grow muscle in the gym, you grow muscle when you're recovering. When you're thinking about fueling a body for performance, and if you move, you're an athlete, right? No matter what you think about your status as an athlete, and that goes partly to your mindset. You are an athlete. You want to make sure, number one, that you're hydrating. You have to stay well hydrated, especially if you live in areas of the country that tend to be hotter or drier. If you're going to be moving outside, you want to make sure that you're consuming adequate water so that you can, your urine will look like a light yellow color. But hydration is very important, whether it's indoor, outdoor, winter, or summer. Plant-based foods have all of the antioxidants, they have the protein, they have all of the vitamins and minerals that are needed to fuel a moving body. And if, combining your core protein source with your greens, with your legumes, with your nuts and seeds, you can create a healthy plate that will fuel your workouts and fuel your recovery. And without the negative aspects that you may derive if you were eating animal-based products. A lot of the benefits of plant-based foods can also help significantly with the recovery. Think about your beets that have nitric oxide, and they can help both pre-workout with vasodilation. They can help ensure that you're delivering oxygen and blood to your recovering muscles. Having a smoothie after your workout that has some beans and some beets and some greens and some berries, all of the beautiful plant foods that we eat are what we need to fuel our body with as plant-powered athletes. And I use the term athlete for anyone who moves their body. The other important thing to think about from a movement perspective in nutrition is getting your vitamin D. It may need to be supplemental, but vitamin D will help you retain your strong, healthy bones. Getting outside and moving is also an important part of that. You can also think about making sure that you're getting your magnesium, which will help with recovery and rest. Rest is so important as a second part of that, as the third leg of the stool, your nutrition, your movement, and your recovery. And that's both rest and sleep, so that your body has an opportunity to heal, and that the next time you're working out from a perspective of a body that's ready to go.
Thank you.
Sorry, I gave a lot there.
No, that's great. Thank you, Daphne, for all of that. Yeah, vitamin D for bones, magnesium for recovery and rest. Magnesium, I'm sure you know the nickname miracle mineral. It really just is so important and has so many roles for in our body. And recovery and rest, I love the emphasis on that because as someone, as I mentioned before, who works with and identifies as an athlete, but I work with many athletes, and I love your if you essentially, like, you are an athlete, if you have a body, you're an athlete. And recovery is just so important, not only for gains, right? Like you said, muscle is not built in the gym, it's built during the recovery process. But for an active lifestyle, for sustaining that active lifestyle, what I've come to learn and appreciate most of all is not just getting consistent in the gym or on the field or in your running shoes or in the pool or on the court, whatever it is that you want to do. But it's also, how are you supporting that active lifestyle outside of that 30-minute, 1 hour, maybe 2 hour activity, right? In your 24-hour day, how are you supporting what you are doing in that very much smaller percentage of time. And that is, like you said, where nutrition and rest and sleep, stress management, that's where essentially where the magic happens.
Well, I think that is the magic. You can undo what you do in the gym by not addressing all of those. And, going back to the nutrition, having that fuel before your workout, if you're someone who needs maybe a rice cake with some peanut butter or something light so that you can optimize your nutrition. If you're an endurance athlete, which it sounds like you are, learning how to fuel your body, there are lots of whole plant foods that are great intra-workout fuels. Some dates, some almonds. They're light. They will give you the carbohydrates, the long lasting carbohydrates that you need for an endurance run or cycle, and they're easy to pack and take with you. And then making sure that after your workout, you get in that whole food meal where you can have your protein source, you can have your grains, your carbs, you can have your berries. All of that's important. And doing that throughout the day is also, pre-workout and post-workout is what a lot of people tend to focus on, but fueling your body throughout the day is the important thing, and making sure that you're meeting both the fuel needs, the calories to energize your body and fuel your body so that it can grow and recover, but then also ensuring that you are having that opportunity, because when you break down muscle, it needs to recover and it needs those nutrients to recover.
Right. This is the way that you nurture this lifestyle. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing and walking us kind of through, the pre and all the way to post, exercise a little bit to give us a good picture there. Daphne, to pivot a little bit,
Uh-huh.
what is the latest when it comes to an active lifestyle? Are there any new practices or learnings that you think people should be aware of or might find interest in as they look to be more active and want to support this active lifestyle?
Oh, well, there always seems to be something new. um, I would start by saying, one, walking is underrated. So I'm going to start with something old, because I think we don't give enough value to simply getting out and walking. Whether it's walking for your cardiovascular fitness, whether it's walking for your fat loss journey, walking is a great form of exercise, and it's something that most of us can do. So even though it's old, I'll say it's new, because we need to refocus on the fact that all you need are a pair of shoes and your body to go walk. Hopefully a friend if you have the opportunity for that sense of community. Some of the new things are, and I want to talk about a few of them, are important, but I need to emphasize that you have to have the basics down. So doing things like cold plunge or sauna, those are icing on the cake. If you're not baking your cake appropriately, meaning that you have a consistent movement practice, that you're fueling your body, that you're recovering, all of the new things are just adding and maybe even detracting from the core that you need to be focusing on. There's a lot of talk around your cardiovascular capacity, your VO2 max, and the correlation between VO2 max and longevity. So, in talking with a lot of the longevity experts, there's a definite way to encourage people to be more focused on their cardiovascular fitness so that you can optimize your VO2 max. That is probably a combination of both kind of low and slow, your steady state cardio, but then also incorporating some more higher intensity. And by higher intensity, I don't mean Orange Theory. It could be fast walking between light poles, or getting on an air bike and doing 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, it all out, and trying to use those type 2 muscle fibers and trying to stimulate your anaerobic system. That combination of low and slow and a little bit of higher intensity, I think, are both important for ensuring that you're using your muscles and optimizing your cardiovascular system for the long term. Some of the other things, and going back to the interval training, the other important thing, especially for women who are going through midlife changes, we do tend to lose some of our type 2 muscle fibers as our estrogen declines. Those are our fast twitch muscle fibers. They're the muscle fibers that you may use to catch yourself if you step off a curb, or you're going to pick up something and maybe you slip. Ensuring that you're keeping those type 2 muscle fibers is important, and doing those activities that are a little bit more intense are one way to do that. So ensuring that you have a balance of your your low and slow type of exercise, walking, jogging, your zone 2 type of activity, and then maybe hitting like a zone 4 occasionally with some high intensity. You hear a lot about rucking now. That's, where you're walking with a weighted vest or walking with a weighted backpack. Going back to walking, I think that is a great form of exercise. It means you're walking against resistance. It's loading your core, it's loading your spine, which is a great stimulus for your musculoskeletal system. You don't need to go out and buy a fancy backpack. If you have a kid's backpack and you can throw in some soup cans or a sandbag, you have a great way of rucking for a minimal investment. And it is also something that you can do. I'll throw on my vest when I'm walking on my walking pad. You can throw on your vest when you're walking on the treadmill, if you're at the gym. So using a weighted vest, I think, is something newer that is also very important. There's a lot of adjuncts to fitness. I mentioned the cold plunge, I mentioned the sauna, mentioned massage. I think these are all things that can be beneficial in terms of helping your recovery and facilitating you meeting your health goals. Again, I would recommend that first you get the basics. And, a sauna and a cold plunge aren't going to get you to the next level of your cardiorespiratory fitness, but being consistent with your workouts and having the mindset that I'm going to do this, maybe you start once a week for a couple of weeks and you go twice a week, but that you over time continue to make progress. That's important. The last thing is that you need to continue to doing the same thing day in and day out isn't necessarily going to get you a different outcome. So there's a concept called progressive overload, where it's most commonly used when you're talking about resistance training, where you can start to increase your sets, your reps, or your resistance as a way to challenge your body and challenge your muscles. If you're not challenging yourself, if you're just biking at the same, 5 miles an hour every day consistently, you probably aren't going to see significant change. You either need to change the resistance, you need to change the intensity of your cycling, you need to somehow progressively overload what you're doing in order to start to see those gains that you're hoping to achieve.
I fully appreciate that. I have a little story I'll share. Back in college, I didn't run for a college team, but I did run.
Uh-huh.
And I remember there was a loop around my dormitory, my dorm residence. And I want to say it was about 5K, the
Uh-huh.
route I would take. Um, and I ran that probably 5 times, 5 days a week. And basically, again, same route, no really new stimuli there, and same pace,
Yep.
same effort.
Yep.
And I had a goal. My goal was to get faster. I wanted to get that time down. That's why I stayed so consistent in the route. I was like, okay, there's no, no other variables here. I should be able to see faster times, in weeks or months. And I only saw either the same times or slower times. I
Mhm.
eventually, it didn't take too long to hit this. I eventually plateaued. I
Mhm.
saw no more gains, so to speak. And I think you just spoke to that. There is this not only benefit but need for that new stimulation, for that new stimulus, for that variety, for that challenge to support growth, whatever that may be, even down to a cellular level. Um, so I really appreciate you mentioning that, because when you said that, I really flashed back to college. And I was like, oh gosh,
Needed to get
yeah,
some
I did not
intervals
do
in there.
things. Yeah, right. Oh, and I love what you said before we move on from this one. I've got another question I wanted to bring, and it might wrap us up. But I love what you said about walking being underrated. I think I'm actually hearing on some podcasts that I've been listening to, there's been like a resurgence in the interest and appreciation for walking, the basics, right? I love that cake metaphor. Like, everything else to some degree is icing on the cake. Focus on that foundation, on movement, on walking, on posture,
Yes.
uh, on consistency, on, like we said before, nutrition and sleep. And then we can bring in some of the other piece that may be considered, or pieces that may be considered icing on that cake, right? Extras on the foundation, which can be fun and can be exciting,
Exactly.
but maybe we focus on that core, on those core areas first. I love that reminder. I think that's so key. And we're talking about a lifestyle here, so that it really should be sustainable. And I think that's going to be really key for folks. So Daphne, thank you for that. And again, one last question here. What is one maybe small actionable step that someone can take today to start incorporating more movement into their daily life?
Walk. I really, if you are able to walk, definitely I would encourage people to walk. The If you have intention in terms of movement, I put together for myself, I call it I have a daily routine. It's something that I do every day. And if there's one thing I would encourage anyone who's listening to do, it's simply move more. And you do need to have some form of baseline. So if you spend 10 hours a day sitting at your computer desk working, just trying to get up once an hour, even if it's just to stand up and take a walk to the water fountain, take a walk to the restroom. But moving is so important in any form. And walking is something that you don't need a lot of time, energy, or expense to do. So that would be the one thing I encourage more people to do, is to get out and either walk on their own, walk with their family. Walking has additional benefits, especially if you're thinking about after a meal. It will help with your digestion. It'll help lower your blood sugar. It will, if you're doing it with your family or friends, it helps with that sense of community. It's low tech, but it's actually high value. And that's what I try and get more people to do. It's also not, it's part of, when you think about your overall metabolism, it's part of the non exercise activity thermogenesis, the NEAT. So when I'm working my walking pad, if I may start walking at 8 a.m. If I stop walking later in the day, there are days I walk 6 miles just on my walking pad. And so walking is underrated, and I would encourage everyone, if you have the ability and space to do so, to get more steps in every day.
I had a feeling you were going to say walking, Daphne. And I mean, 6 miles on a walking pad for someone as busy as I'm sure you are, clearly, it's not about, uh, like you are prioritizing movement in that way, right? You've got other things to do, but you have found a way to make it work because, again, back to mindset, movement matters so much to you. And once we cultivate that mindset, and again, it may take some time, it may take some practice, but we tend to prioritize the things that we uh, appreciate more and find really gives us a lot of benefits. And as we all know, movement can do that. If you haven't felt that yet, maybe we just have to kind of help you cultivate, or you just have to help yourself cultivate that mindset a little bit more. Daphne, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation with you. I want to just thank you on behalf of the whole team here. for your time and this really engaging conversation on movement and why it matters and how we can get more of it in a sustainable way, which is really important. For folks who want to learn more, just follow you, see what you're up to, where can they do that?
Well, thank you. I mean, you know how much I love talking about movement. And as you were wrapping up, I'm like, oh, I have 100 million more things we can talk about. But I thank you for the opportunity. And I hope anyone listening took away one thing today that will encourage you to move more. And I'd love for you to, if you want to learn more about movement, if you go to thriveonplantslife.com, you'll be able to join the conversation there. We talk about plant-based nutrition, we talk about movement, we talk a lot about mindset, sleep, social connection. It's a great way to engage in a community of like-minded people that are trying to live healthfully and happily for as long as possible.
Wonderful. Well, Daphne, thank you again so much. And we appreciate you.
I
Take good
appreciate this
care.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.